1966 U.S. Senator J Fulbright claimed that Saigon has become an American brothel. Along with the endless blood and tears of the Vietnam War came a flood of American dollars and thousands of men willing and able to spend them. Impoverished Vietnamese women and young girls who had no source of income found men willing to pay handsomely for their bodies. As the war prevented them from pursuing any other occupation, the market was booming. But with the good wages came abuse, violence, social stigma, venereal disease, and often pregnancy. There is always a sexual element to war, whether based on violence or transaction, and the war in Vietnam was no different. During the French colonial period, prostitution in Vietnam was highly regulated. The female workers were required to register with the local police, paid high taxes on their income, and were subject to constant health checks. Those found to have contracted an STD were ordered to stop working and quarantine until treatment was complete. With the instability caused by the departure of the French colonial infrastructure and the new war effort headed by the USA, the industry became largely a free-for-all, as thousands of men, far from home, sought some level of pleasure and companionship amongst all the fear and bloodshed. The new post-colonial market was one of total disorder, totally lacking in oversight or regulation. There were no health checks, no registration of working women, and no care as to the age of the women participating, or as to whether they were even willing participants. Street walking was, on paper, illegal in South Vietnam, but this did not stop it from occurring. There were raids conducted on brothels, sometimes with hundreds of women arrested. But the reality was that it was a lucrative source of income for corrupt politicians and officers of the South Vietnamese army, as well as perhaps being considered a necessary evil when taking into account the tens of thousands of foreign fighting men now occupying the country. This arrangement was no secret, with the Vietnamese government official in Saigon even declaring street walking to be an inexhaustible source of US dollars for the state. By the end of the war in 1975, it was estimated that there were 300,000 to 500,000 ladies of the evening operating within South Vietnam. Women in the crossfire. The destruction of farmland, the failure of the Strategic Hamlets program, and the forced relocation of rural villagers played a large part in bringing women and girls into the industry. Many Vietnamese villagers felt unsafe in their rural hamlets or lost farmland and livestock due to mine laying or the use of defoliants, such as Agent Orange. The strength of the US dollar was also enticing, and what might be considered only a small sum in America was a lot of money in Vietnam. One woman, when she was offered $400 to sleep with 2 US servicemen, said, "I stared at the cash the way a thirsty prisoner stares at water. $400 would support my mother, me, and Hung for over and to make it, I wouldn't even have to work up a sweat. Just lie down and let those 2 American boys be men. What could they do to me that hadn't been done already?" The $200 offered by each soldier would amount to only 2 weeks' pay for an American sergeant, but could maintain a family in Vietnam for a year. Many women were not enticed at all, but forced. Violence committed by American and South Vietnamese soldiers in the field was not uncommon, and in the Vietnamese culture of the era, a victim of rape would never be eligible for marriage and would be shunned by her family. The supposed mark of dishonor meant they were social outcasts, and their only option for earning money was to work as a scarlet woman or bar girl. There was also an increase in human trafficking, mainly in young women and girls. These women were not necessarily even Vietnamese, as women were brought in from neighboring countries such as Laos and Cambodia, countries that were also going through war and instability. Rural women who fled as refugees to Saigon would find themselves met off by the bus by kindly women offering them employment, usually as domestic servants. The reality of their new work would soon be made evident. Debt was used to keep them enslaved, as their new pimps would never allow it to be paid off, a system which continues today. Those who attempted escape would be ruthlessly hunted by their captors. Not all contact between soldiers and civilians was transactional. Sexual assault was also a significant problem for the forces of the US, South Korea, and the South Vietnamese. Raids on supposedly hostile villages often resulted in women being attacked. During the My Lai massacre, around 20 Vietnamese women were raped and then murdered. with some as young as 13 years old. Another notorious incident is that of Hill 192. American soldiers on a village raid captured and bound a young Vietnamese girl, who was then gang raped and murdered. Only 41 incidents of assault ever resulted in a court-martial, though the small few who were convicted often found their sentences reduced drastically. In one case, where a 13-year-old girl was attacked during an interrogation, the guilty man was sentenced to 20 years in prison with hard labor, reduced to 1 year. In the end, he would only serve 7 months and 16 days. The U.S. Army established its first military brothels in 1966, just 1 year after entering Vietnam. These brothels were within the perimeters of American Army bases and were intended to prevent soldiers from visiting potentially dangerous brothels, where they might contract debilitating venereal diseases. The health of the women participating was monitored and regulated by the U.S. Army, but the supply of women and pricing was left up to the Vietnamese. The ability to access healthy women was essential to the U.S. administration, who were wholly resigned to the fact that their soldiers would solicit intercourse, whether it was allowed or not, as venereal disease risked making soldiers unfit for combat. Sexual diseases were rampant when compared to the rates suffered by soldiers serving at home in the United States. Men serving in Vietnam were over 8 times more likely to contract a disease, of which the most common was gonorrhea. The unlucky few, roughly 1% of all soldiers infected with the disease, would find themselves sick with syphilis. Soldiers and Marines waiting to ship out to Vietnam were warned about a supposedly prevalent disease, black syphilis, which rotted off a man's genitals within days. This specific ailment was fictional, used only to deter men from seeking the services of scarlet women. Intoxication and intercourse. Once a month, U.S. soldiers were granted a few days of R&R, rest and relaxation, or as some called it, I&I, intoxication and intercourse. Many soldiers spent this time in Saigon, now Ho Chi Minh City, which offered a bustling nightlife and easy access to substances and mature themes. With the destruction of villages and defoliation of farmland, refugees fleeing to Saigon increased eightfold, from 500,000 to 4 million. This meant there was no shortage of women willing to entertain American servicemen. By 1966, the city had over 1,000 bars, 100 nightclubs, and 30 cabaret halls. There were thousands of brothels, massage parlors, and bars that catered solely to American personnel, providing them with everything they wanted. There was a variation in the services provided by different types of workers. The women working in the official American brothels offered routine intercourse and nothing else. The bar girls working in the clubs and bars were primarily concubines, but also provided short-term companionship, somewhat like an escort. Some worked as key girls. These women would spend a predetermined amount of time living with a specific serviceman. Some might stay for a week or a month, while others might stay for the duration of the soldier's tour of duty. Their usual living expenses, such as accommodation and food, would be supplied, and they may earn a wage on top. This could be an advantageous position, but it could also be a dangerous one. Key girls were often subject to domestic abuse and violence, but could not leave without risking homelessness. There were also large numbers of Vietnamese women who married American soldiers. Between 1965 and 1975, 8,040 Vietnamese women came to America with their new husbands, but many more were left in Vietnam. These relationships sometimes had a happy ending, with them both resettling in the USA. Unfortunately, however, many ended in heartache. After being discharged and sent home, soldiers would set about organizing their wife's emigration. Sometimes, this was not possible, for one reason or another, though in other cases, the soldiers' promises were, in fact, false ones, and no attempt was ever made. These women, abandoned by their husbands in war-torn Vietnam, faced endless discrimination, especially those who had married Black or Hispanic servicemen. Life of dust. Another object of derision was the mixed-race children of Vietnamese women and American soldiers. The mothers and their children, referred to as bui doi, meaning life of dust, were shunned by Vietnamese society, even by their own families. Whether the child was a result of a serious monogamous relationship or a violent attack did not matter. The issue and America's responsibility for it were recognized early in the war, with one U.S. Senate hearing claiming, simply put, They are by and large rejected by society at this time and frequently abandoned. If no plan of evacuation and foster is devised for those who are cast aside, then they will definitely have a difficult future road to treat. American soldiers are estimated to have conceived as many as 50,000 Amerasian children in Vietnam, many of whom were abandoned. There were multiple reasons for this persecution. The new communist regime viewed them and their mothers as traitors for involvement with the American forces. They were judged for their mixed racial heritage in a society that looked down upon interracial relations, and also for their lack of a father in a highly patriarchal society. Due to the societal rejection of these children, many were abandoned by their mothers, who wished to hide away any evidence that they had good relations with the Americans. Many of these children of dust were left to fend for themselves in the streets, where they were exposed to violence and abuse. Thanks to various charities and the guilty feeling of many former GIs, it is believed that over half of all the Vietnam War-era Amerasian children have emigrated to the United States, with many locating their birth fathers, many of whom were not even aware of their existence. The rapid expansion of the South Vietnamese industry and the generally lawless nature of it created a complex and wide-ranging issue that still affects Vietnam today. Still alive today, there are women shunned by their families due to their supposed dishonor, and adult Amerasian men and women who've spent their lives forced to live on the peripheries of society, repudiated by their fellow countrymen, their neighbors, and even their own parents.